guys, it's Miss Rogers here. Today we're going to work with word problems that have to do with solving using either multiplication or division. Alright, word problems are used in a math class pretty often. Okay, so when you think of a math class, you probably think of like word problems. And even though we may not be fond of word problems, I remember when I was in school, I didn't like word problems in math class. But I believe as a teacher, the more that we see word problems, the more that we be familiar with word problems, the more like we become more mathematicians and the better we become at solving word problems. Because word problems, they just challenge you. They just make you think outside of the box. They want you to use the knowledge that's in your head. So they're just going to challenge you. And I believe as a teacher, the more often we see word problems and the more that we're challenged as mathematicians, the more that we can be more familiar with word problems and get to know them and not be scared of them. So today we're going to work with multiplication and division dealing with word problems. So let's start with multiplication. So if you notice on my board, I have some keywords that help explain what multiplication is. And remember, multiplication is just repeated addition. So you're taking two numbers and you're adding one number the other many times. So I will get into an example here in a second. But let's look at our keywords first. So some keywords to know for multiplication are altogether, times, per, and each. Now these are just a few keywords for multiplication. There are a lot more keywords to know for multiplication. These are just a few. I just wanted to put these on the board to help show you that when you see any of these words or a version of these words written in a sentence, that it should go off in your head, oh, I'm going to multiply. All right, so let's do an example because I just stated a minute ago that multiplication is repeated addition, which it is. So if I was to give you the example, 5 times 7, all right? If you don't know 5 times 7 is 35, you can multiply them, but I'm going to show you the repeated addition way to do multiplication because when I get to my word problem here in a few minutes, I'm not going to repeat addition with those numbers because they're too big of a number. I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to put you all through that. So let's look at 5 times 7. All right. So if you don't know if 5 times 7 is 35, let's look at the repeated addition way to get this answer. So what this is saying, you're going to take 5 and you're going to add 5 to itself 7 different times. That's where you get the numbers. Now you can do it vice versa. You can take 7 and add 7 to itself 5 times, whatever way you want. They're both correct. Choose which way makes you more comfortable. But I'm going to stick with the 5 adding it to itself 7 different times. So what this is saying, you're going to take 5 and add it to itself 7 different times. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All I did was I took 5 and I added it to itself 7 different times. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, so now let's solve it. I know 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15, right? So another group of 3 5s, 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15. Okay? Then I have this loner 5 that I'm just going to bring down. I know 15 plus 15 is 30. Okay? And 30 plus 5 is 35. So my answer of 5 times 7 is 35. And the way I got that using repeated addition was taking 5 and I added 5 to itself 7 different times to get me my answer of 35. All right, so let's move into our word problem now. All right, so let me erase this problem right here. All right, so let's look at our word problem. There are 84 sticks in a box. How many sticks are in 17 boxes? Now, the first thing you should do with the word problem, Obviously, you're going to read the word problem and you're going to get to know the word problem, like the important parts in it. You're going to know what it wants you to do. But when you are working with the word problem, one of the first things you need to do is figure out what it's asking you. You need to figure out what operation that you're going to be using to solve the problem. So in this problem, it's wanting to know how many sticks are in 17 boxes. So if you remember back to the first part of the video where I did some keywords with multiplication, if you notice, those keywords aren't like specifically stated in this problem. It's stated in a different form. All this problem is asking you, it wants to know how many sticks are all together. Even though it's not specifically stating how many sticks are all together, you can kind of infer when it says how many sticks are in 17 boxes. If it tells you how many sticks are in one box. Okay, so we're looking at the keyword of all together in this problem. So another important step I would suggest when you do a word problem, and I'm sure your teachers at school have taught you this, is when you look at a word problem, circle or underline the important parts. That way, so you don't have to go back and read the whole word problem all over again. You can just pay attention to your circles or your underlining. Me personally, when I do a word problem, I like to underline the important parts in the sentence. So that could be like numbers that it's told me, what those numbers represent, maybe keywords in the question, how many numbers is it looking for, whatever the problem is asking you, underline it if you think it's important. So if I look back at my problem, I would underline 84 sticks because that's the number it's telling us. It's telling us there are 84 sticks in a box. Okay? Then I would also underline 17 boxes because it wants to know how many sticks are in 17 boxes. Okay? So now, after you figured out what the word problem is telling you and what it wants you to do, now we can go into solving it. So our problem is 84 times 17. That is the problem we're going. Now, if you're a genius, you might be able to solve that problem without having to set it up or not. If you're like me and a lot of you all, we had to do some kind of model to solve this problem because I know without looking at that, I cannot solve this problem just by looking at it. I'm going to have to do some math. So you can do multiplication the long way. In this video, I'm going to show you doing the box method. That's the easiest way for me to do multiplication. So do it whichever way you want. With the box way, what you're going to do, you're going to make a little box. And depending on how many numbers, and if it's a 1-digit number, 2-digit numbers, 3-digit numbers, however many digit numbers, that's going to tell you how many boxes you have. Where I have 2-digit numbers with both of these, I'm just going to split them into, I'm going to split this box into 4 sections, okay, that represent my digits, okay? So the first number I'm going to look at is the 84. And 84, if you do expanded form, or you take that number and you expand it out to show the tens and the ones, your numbers would be 80 and 4. Because you have 80, so you have a 4 in the ones place and an 8 in the tens place. 8 tens is 80, and 4 ones is 4. Okay, so that is how I got my first set of boxes, how I'm going to set it up. Now the number I'm going to look at is 17. So if I was to do the expanded form of 17 to show the tens and the ones, it would be 10 and 7 because I have 7 ones and a group of 10. So it'd be 10 and 7. So now when you have the problem set up, now you're going to multiply them together. So if you look right here, we look at 10 and you look at 80, you're going to multiply them together, okay? A trick when you're multiplying by zeros is obviously you're going to look at the zeros, but the way I would suggest is looking at the 8 and the 1, and I know 8 times 1 is 8, so I'm going to put my 8 right here, and then I'm just going to add 2 zeros. That is the trick when you multiply by zeros, is just pay attention how many zeros you use and put them there. Just pay attention to the big numbers or the numbers that are in the front. Okay? So now I'm going to look at 10 and 4. 10 times 4 is 40. Okay? So now I got those complete. I'm going to be done with 10. If it would help you, mark out 10. You can mark out 10 if you want. Now I'm going to look at 80 and 7. Alright? So, like I just told you with zeros, trick with zeros is just bring that 0 down. Okay, so I'm going to put that 0 right there. Now I'm just going to look at 8 and 7. Alright? 8 and 7, or 8 times 7, could be tricky if you don't know it automatically. But if you know it, you should know that 8 times 7 is 56. Okay? So, 80 times 7 is 560. Alright? Now, the last box we have is 7 times 4. 7 times 4 is 28. Alright? So now, when you have all your boxes filled in, like we do right here, now you're going to add them up. Okay? So I'm going to take 800 plus 560 plus 40 plus 28. Okay? So now, if I look in my ones place, I have all zeros except this 8. So I'm just going to bring the 8 down. Now look at tens. 6 plus 4 is 10, plus 2 is 12. Okay? 8 plus 1 is 9, plus 5 is 14. Okay? So my answer is 1,428. But when you deal with the word problem, instead of putting your answer, you need to put your units or what was being talked about in your sentence. So if we were talking about sticks, my answer would be 1,428 sticks. Okay? You put it in a complete sentence. There are 1,428 sticks in 17 boxes. That is an easy way to look at that. All right, I'm going to get my board that has division. All right, so now we're going to look at division. All right, so division is the inverse or the opposite of multiplication. All right, so if you think of multiplication being repeated addition, division is repeated subtraction. All right, so some key words to look at with division are cut up, between, half, or how many in each. Again, like I said, with multiplication, they might not be stated that way, but just as long as you know like what it's talking about, then you'll be fine. Okay, so we're only going to do the first one. So I'm going to erase number 2. All right, so if I look at my first problem, 192 eggs can fit into boxes of 16 eggs. How many boxes can I fill? All right, so like I said, division is a fancy way of saying repeated subtraction. So I'm not going to use repeated subtraction for these big numbers because that is, yeah, I'm not going to do that because that would be bad. So instead, I'm going to do the problem 60 divided by 10 to show you the repeated subtraction part. Okay? So with repeated subtraction, you start with your big number and you're going to subtract the other number that many times until you get to 0. So if I took 60 and I subtracted 10, I would get 50, subtract another 10, I would get 40, subtract another 10 to get 30. I'm going to bring my 30 up here, subtract another 10, that's 20, then another 10, that's 10, and then subtract my last group of 10 till I get to 0. Now, my answer to this problem, if I was showing it with repeated subtraction, would be the amount of times I had to subtract 10. Okay, so if I went back here and I looked, here's my first time I had to subtract 10. Number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6. So my answer would be 6 because I had to subtract 10 6 different times till I got to 0. Okay, so that is the way you show it with repeated subtraction. Like I said, I'm not doing repeated subtraction for this problem because the number is too big. All right, so going back to my problem, I would underline 192 eggs and then boxes of 16 eggs. What that is showing is 192 eggs is how many you have, and a box can fit 16 eggs. And wants to know how many boxes you need to have to fit all 192 eggs. Okay, so that kind of goes with the how many in each, okay? Because we're talking about if there's 16 boxes or 16 eggs that can fit in a box, how many boxes do you need if I have 192 eggs? So if I set up my problem is going to look like 192 divided by 16. All right? With division, you're going to have a division box, okay? So you're going to take your big number or the number that's in the front and put it in a division box, which is the way I look at a division box is kind of like half of a box. So you have a line that goes above the number and then a line that goes right beside the number. Then you take the number that's on the right side of the division sign and you're going to put it outside of the box. Okay? So my problem looks like 16, your division box, and then 192 inside of your division box. Now, the proper way to say this problem is 192 divided by 16. All right, so it's kind of going the opposite way. So let's look at this problem. So can 16 go into 1? No, it cannot because you have 16 as the big number, 1 as the smaller number. That's not possible. So let's look at the next set of numbers. 16 and 19. So I'm going to look at how many times 16 can go into 19, which is 1. Okay, because 16 times 1 is 16. 16 times 2, hang on, I messed up. 16 times 2 is 32. So I would have to use 16 times 1 because I can't go over 19. All right, so I would put my 1 over the 9. Now I'm going to multiply 1 and 16, and I just said that was 16. All right, so now I'm going to subtract. 19 take away 16. 9 take away 6 is 3. 1 take away 1 is nothing. I don't have to put a 0 there. Now my next step in division is to bring that 2 down. I'm going to bring that 2 down. All right, so now I got to figure out how many times 16 can go into 32. And a minute ago, I just said that answer. 16 times 2 is 32. So 16 can go 2 times into 32. So I'm going to put my 2 over my 2, and 2 times 16 is 32. When I subtract them, I get 0. So my answer is 12. 192 divided by 16 equals 12 boxes. Because it was wanting to know how many boxes I needed to fill 192 eggs up. If I was to put that in a complete sentence, I would say something like, you would need 12 boxes for a total of 192 eggs. Something along those lines. I hope this video helped you guys with word problems on how to solve using multiplication and division. Until next time, have a good day.